Arcane Universe Chapter 1 Feng Chou was a famous person in the university. He was not famous because he was one of the top students in the university. It was because of his ugliness. Someone once used the word sour to describe Feng Chou's appearance. You can imagine how ugly he was. Feng Chou woke up with difficulty from his hangover and could not help but groan in pain. His head hurt, especially the back of his head. It reminded him of the painful experience of being hit by a stick in high school. Feng Chou strenuously raised his head and opened his dry eyes. Then, he saw a scene that he had never even dreamed of. A strange-looking but beautiful woman was looking at him with a strange look in her eyes. This beautiful woman was looking at him with a complicated expression that was a mixture of greed and thirst. Feng Chou felt that this expression was very familiar, as if he had seen it often in the past. Feng Chou, who was still in a daze, subconsciously tilted his head and stared at the woman's eyes for a while. Suddenly, he realized that this was the kind of look that the horny boys in the dormitory had when they saw a beautiful woman. But, this woman is looking at me with such an expression. What is the meaning of this? Has her taste reached this level? Feng Chou, who had just woken up from his hangover, could not help but curse in his heart. This woman looks so strange. The grogginess from just waking up gradually faded away and Feng Chou's thoughts finally returned to the right track. This woman's appearance was indeed very strange. The modern era's information technology was very advanced. Even in the Amazon jungle, the tribal women who were isolated from the world could be found online. However, Feng Chou was sure that he had never seen this woman's appearance before. She had purplish black skin and a pair of long pointy ears sticking out from her silver hair. Although her skin color, hair color and ears were very strange, one had to admit that this was a very beautiful woman. Exquisite facial features, ruby-like eyes, and her tall and enchanting figure. Even the campus belle of the university could not compare to her. This was definitely a beautiful woman that could make most men drool. Feng Chou's groggy mind was wondering what kind of strange breed this woman was when a strange word suddenly appeared in his heart. This word was like a fuse. With its appearance, countless strange and unfamiliar memories suddenly emerged from the bottom of Feng Chou's heart. It was like a container containing numerous rubber balls. After sinking to the bottom of the sea, the container's door suddenly opened. Countless memories were like rubber balls under the water, gurgling to the surface of the water, unable to be stopped. Feng Chou only had time to say, FCK. Under the shock and the countless strange memories in his mind, he fainted again. What Feng Chou did not know was that not long after he fainted again, he was taken down from an interrogation bed by two male Dro warriors under the regretful gaze of the female Dro who was staring at him with hungry eyes. They dragged him out of the dark interrogation room. The two Dro warriors dragged the unconscious Feng Chou through a long underground corridor and a spiral staircase. They walked out of a dark building and came to a city. The environment of this city looked very strange. It was filled with a dark red light and the whole city was filled with the smell of sulfur. In the distance and above his head, he could vaguely see jagged rocks and stalactites. It was as if this city was built in a huge cave. In fact, this city was really built in a huge cave. This was an underground city that belonged to the Dro elves. The two warriors dragged Feng Chou like a dead dog through the countless Dro elves, bear goblin slave soldiers, Grey dwarf slaves, troglodytes, goblin slaves, and even a small number of human slaves. They passed through the strictly guarded inner city, the chaotic slave district, and came to a remote corner at the edge of the underground city. In this corner of the underground city, there was a square, and in the middle of the square stood a tall circular tower. If Feng Chou woke up now, his new memories would tell him that this was a wizard tower. A young Dro wizard was waiting at the entrance of the wizard tower. Under his lead, the two Dro warriors dragged Feng Chou through 2 rows of ferocious stone statues and walked into the interior of the wizard tower. They took a magical elevator and came to the door of a laboratory on the higher levels of the wizard tower. The young wizard stopped and carefully knocked on the door of the laboratory. There was no response from the door, but the young wizard didn't knock and just waited quietly. After waiting for a few minutes, the door slowly opened. Behind the door was a huge laboratory. In the middle of the laboratory was an equally huge circular experiment table. There were all kinds of strange utensils on the table, An old male drow wearing a dark red robe was busy with something in the inner circle of the circular experiment table. He didn't seem to notice that someone had come, and kept his head down as he busied himself. The young drow wizard stood quietly at the door, not daring to disturb the old wizard. The two drow warriors were trembling with fear. Fortunately, not long after, the old wizard raised his head from his experiment and looked at them. Seeing Feng Chou in the hands of the two warriors, a smile appeared on his aged face as he said, "Is this human the fellow with the bloodline of the Stewart clan? Come, let me take a look." The two drow warriors hurriedly dragged Feng Chou forward and placed him on the floor. The old wizard walked out from the circular experiment table and walked in front of Feng Chou. He squatted down and started to pinch and touch his body. As he did so, an expression of interest appeared on the old wizard's face. This scene looked very wretched. If Feng Chou woke up at this moment, he would probably faint again. Fortunately, Feng Chou didn't wake up. After a while, the old wizard seemed disappointed. He stood up and waved his hand, allowing the warriors to drag Feng Chou to a room at the side of the laboratory. On the floor of this room, there was a mysterious and complicated circular pattern. In the four corners of the room, there were 4 black iron cages. Inside the cages, there were several humanoid creatures with extremely developed fur lying motionlessly. The two drow warriors followed the old wizard's instructions and dragged Feng Chou into the room, throwing him in the middle of the circular pattern. The old wizard then had the young wizard bring the two drow warriors out of the wizard tower. Without a wizard leading the way, no one dared to walk around the wizard tower. When the young wizard returned, the old wizard ordered him to take off Feng Chou's clothes and fix him on the spell formation in the room. The young wizard complied and walked into the room, beginning to remove Feng Chou's clothes. The old wizard returned to the experiment table and busied himself again. At this time, Feng Chou had already woken up. The two drow warriors had thrown him too roughly, causing the back of his injured head to hit the ground. The intense pain woke him up. When Feng Chou first woke up, he thought his headache was due to the hangover, but it wasn't. The pain came from the wound on the back of his head. When he woke up again, Feng Chou couldn't care about anything else, trying his best to organize the inexplicable memories in his mind. These memories told him that his name was Leo, the son of a frontier knight. His father's castle had been attacked by a group of drow. The drow had killed everyone in the castle, leaving only him as a captive. After being captured, he struggled too hard, so he received a heavy blow to the back of his head and fainted. The headache he had when he first woke up was due to the blow to the back of his head. However, Feng Chou knew very well that he wasn't Leo. His name was Feng Chou, an ugly monster abandoned by his parents. If it wasn't for his foster father taking him in, he would have died 20 years ago. 3 days ago, news of his foster father's death came from his hometown. Feng Chou rushed back to his hometown in the middle of the night to arrange his funeral. It was said to be a funeral, but in reality, it was just an urn, a small grave, and a good friend of his foster father. After coldly sending his foster father off, Feng Chou, who had always been calm and self-controlled, used 2 bottles of strong liquor to get himself drunk. When he woke up, he saw the scene at the beginning of the story. When he woke up again, Feng Chou's mind was in a mess. Very messy. However, this didn't stop him from coming to a somewhat absurd conclusion about his current situation. He felt that he seemed to have encountered a very popular thing in recent years. Time travel. Yes, he felt that it was very likely that he had time traveled. Feng Chou didn't care too much about time travel. After his foster father passed away, there was no longer anyone or anything in that world that was worth his attention. Time travel was time travel. However, just because he didn't care about time travel didn't mean that he didn't care about his current situation. Feng Chou took advantage of the old mage's busy work in front of the experiment table to look up and observe his situation. The owner of the new memory, Leo, had the identity of a mage apprentice. This identity didn't bring much power or glory, but at least it allowed Feng Chou to have a better understanding of the so-called mages and magic than the average person. Whether it was the magic circle below him, or the huge experiment table outside the door, and all kinds of strange equipment, it all pointed to the fact that this was a mage's laboratory. With Liu's memories about mages, coupled with Feng Chou's modern knowledge, it wasn't hard to deduce that he was about to become a test subject. This conjecture didn't make Feng Chou too afraid. As a hideous monster, Feng Chou's life was very rough. After his foster father died, there was nothing in this world that was worth staying in, so he wasn't afraid of death. However, not being afraid of death didn't mean that he was willing to be treated like a lab rat. So, even though Liu's memories told him that he, a mage apprentice and level 2 warrior, had no chance of survival if he fell into the hands of the master of a mage tower, he still decided to struggle and resist. Feng Chou's target was the young mage, even though the old man in the hall looked weaker, but according to Liu's memories, this kind of old mage was scarier than a magical beast. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 2. Feng Chou weakly lay on the ground, letting the young mage take off his clothes one by one. As the son of a frontier knight, Liu couldn't be considered a noble, but his status was still nobler than an ordinary commoner. After all, he had a noble bloodline. He was currently wearing a hunting suit that was quite popular among ordinary nobles. This kind of suit was soft and tight. It didn't affect his movements, but it was quite troublesome to put it on. Of course, it was also troublesome to take it off. The young mage Dro spent a lot of effort to take off Feng Chou's blood-stained clothes. He bent down to gather the tattered clothes together, and just as he was about to leave with this pile of trash, the naked human behind him suddenly jumped up from the ground and pounced on his back. The young mage Dro was very vigilant and reacted very quickly. Just as Feng Chou jumped up from the ground, he made a strange gesture, and at the same time, a short and melodious syllable came out of his mouth. However, it seemed like nothing happened, at least in Feng Chou's eyes. He hadn't completely digested Liu's memories that he had just fused with. These memories seemed to be separated from his thoughts by a layer of gauze, and couldn't be used as quickly as his own memories and experiences. Without time to think, Feng Chou's body had already pounced on the young mage's back, one of his hands going through the young mage's neck, using all his strength to firmly lock him. Feng Chou's series of actions didn't have a trace of hesitation, revealing a frightening fierceness. Unfortunately, this kind of fierceness was meaningless in front of a mage. Feng Chou quickly realized that something was wrong. No matter how hard he tried to strangle the sorcerer, he was unable to touch the sorcerer's skin. There seemed to be a thin, but extremely sturdy membrane between his arm and the sorcerer's neck. The young mage didn't seem to be in pain after being strangled by Feng Chou. He even unhurriedly revealed a disdainful sneer before extending his right hand and making a strange gesture. He once again uttered a different syllable, but it was still short and melodious. Feng Chou used all his strength to strangle him, but he couldn't make his voice tremble in the slightest. As the young mage's syllables fell, a rope drilled out of his sleeve. This rope was like a spirit snake, coiling around Feng Chou's body and tying him up like a dumpling in the blink of an eye. Feng Chou, who was tied up like a dumpling, naturally fell from the mage's body. The mage turned around and glared fiercely at Feng Chou with a pair of red eyes. His handsome face was filled with viciousness as if he wanted to devour someone. But this young mage stared fiercely at Feng Chou for a while, then turned to look at the old mage's back. In the end, he didn't take any further action and roughly dragged Feng Chou to the center of the array. Under the young mage's command, the rope binding Feng Chou kept squirming, freeing one of his hands. The young mage grabbed this freed hand and pressed it towards a certain part of the array. Feng Chou naturally wasn't willing to let him do as he wished, and struggled with all his might. After all, he was a second-rank warrior, so his strength wasn't small. The young mage actually couldn't resist him. Feng Chou finally enraged the mage. He jumped up from the ground and fiercely kicked Feng Chou's head. After 7 or 8 kicks, he finally suppressed his anger. Looking at Feng Chou lying on the ground, he was actually looking at him with a disdainful and despicable expression. His blood rushed to his head, and he almost lost control of his emotions. This despicable expression was what Feng Chou often used when he was bullied as a child in order to protect his last bit of self-esteem. Even though this expression would make him suffer even more, the young mage took a few deep breaths to suppress his anger. After calming down, he seemed to have thought of something. and cast a spell at Feng Chou with some annoyance. As the incantation fell, Feng Chou's vision darkened, and he fell into a deep sleep. Using sleep spell to make Feng Chou fall into a magical sleep, the young mage waved his hand to remove the rope that was wrapped around him. This spell that made the rope as flexible as a spirit snake and could be controlled by the mage was called living rope. Like sleep spell, it was only a first-rank spell. The young mage pulled the sleeping Feng Chou into a spread position, and placed his hands and feet on 4 special small platforms on the array. After placing Feng Chou in place, the young mage made a gesture and softly chanted a few syllables of an incantation. A few black octopus-like tentacles emerged from the 4 small platforms, firmly locking Feng Chou's 4 limbs. After securing Feng Chou in the array, the young mage carried his tattered hunting clothes and walked out. As a first-rank spell, sleep spell only had a basic effective time of 1 minute. As soon as the young mage left, Feng Chou woke up. After waking up, Feng Chou tilted his head to look at the black tentacles that were tightly wrapped around his wrists and ankles. He struggled for a while, and after making sure that he could not break free, he gave up and began to look around the room. He also searched Liu's memories and began to identify the things in the room. In fact, the things in the room were very limited. Other than the magic array below him, there were only the 4 iron cages in the 4 corners of the room that held unknown humanoid creatures. The iron bars that made up the iron cages were very thick, with a diameter of more than 3 centimeters. A faint dark blue luster shone through the darkness. Black steel. A strange word emerged from Leo's memories. According to Leo's memories, black steel was an alloy made from a metal unique to this world called black iron as the main material. This alloy was a very widely used metal alchemy material. Its biggest feature was its sturdiness, which could even reach 10 times the strength of ordinary steel. Among all the low-grade alchemy materials, black steel was the strongest in terms of both hardness and toughness. Even some mid-grade alchemy materials could not compare to it. The reason why black steel was a low-grade alchemy material was that its magic conductivity was too poor. A sword made of black steel was enough for a 5th-rank warrior to use on the battlefield without worrying about damage. This alloy was even more expensive than silver of the same weight in the market. Such a tough and expensive metal was used to make such a heavy cage. What kind of thing was inside the cage? Feng Chou could not help but carefully observe the creature in the cage. It was a creature with limbs similar to a human's, but with a head similar to a cat's. The front of its arms were not human hands, but the sharp claws of a ferocious beast. Very quickly, one name after another appeared in Feng Chou's mind. Tigerman. Tigerman were a type of Were-creatures. As for Were-creatures, according to Feng Chou's understanding of the information in Leo's memories, they should be similar to the werewolves of the Western Middle Ages. Were-creature was like a virus. Once a normal human was infected with a certain Were-creature virus, their body could possibly mutate. Under certain circumstances, they would turn into something that was half human and half beast. Tigermen were Were-creatures that could turn into half human and half tiger. According to Leo's memories, Tigermen were the strongest type of Were-creatures. Once a normal human was infected with Tigerman's Were-creature virus, if their body's immune system failed and they could survive the mutation without dying from complications, their body would undergo drastic changes in a short period of time. They would become very strong, even comparable to a 5th-rank warrior. After all, a 5th-rank warrior was already considered a mid-ranked warrior. That wasn't all. Tigermen infected with Were-creature virus would also gain the ability to transform, becoming half human and half tiger like a werewolf. Once they transformed into their half human, half beast form, the physique of the Tigerman would greatly increase, even comparable to an 8th-rank warrior. Leo knew very well how powerful an 8th-rank warrior was. When Leo was young, he had seen his father casually punch a wild horse that had charged at him out of fear, sending it flying 5 or 6 meters away. At that time, his father was already a 8th-rank arcane knight. If there were only these benefits, then many people who pursued power by hook or by crook wouldn't mind becoming Tigermen. However, the disadvantages of being infected with Were-creature virus were also very obvious. Recreature virus would erode the intelligence of intelligent creatures. The end result was that the victim would completely turn into a wild beast. This was something that no intelligent creature could accept. The most obvious sign of recreatures losing their intelligence was that they would maintain their half-human, half-beast form for a long period of time. Some recreatures had even completely lost the ability to transform back into a human. The 4 Tigermen in the metal cage maintained their recreature even when they were unconscious. It was obvious that they were the kind of people who had completely lost their intelligence. Looking at these 4 Tigermen, Feng Chou suddenly had an ominous premonition. Could it be that this mage was going to conduct a bloodline fusion experiment? When Leo was in the mage school, he had read a book about recreatures. Even though his memory of the contents of the book was already blurry, he still remembered some of the most basic information about recreatures. Recreatures were actually the products of failed experiments during the Arcane Empire when those crazy arcanists were researching how to create powerful warriors in batches. Leo clearly remembered that it was written at the end of that book. Even today, there are still some mages who are obsessed with researching the bloodline modification of recreatures. If they could solve the problem of the recreature virus eroding intelligence, then this bloodline would undoubtedly be an excellent method to create powerful warriors in batches. It could even easily change the balance of power between the various races in the Tharlan continent. However, bloodline modification is an extremely cruel experiment. The experiment could cause the bloodline of the test subject to collapse, and in turn cause the body to completely collapse. The test subject would turn into a ball of thick, scarlet minced meat in extreme pain. This deduction made Feng Chou's hair stand on end. Report select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 3. It took a lot of effort for Feng Chou to calm himself down. He forced himself to focus on the magic circle below him, but he quickly gave up because the magic circle was too complicated. It was not something a mage apprentice could understand. He turned his attention back to himself. Feng Chou quickly confirmed that this body was not his original body. Regarding this, Feng Chou was not surprised. When he obtained Leo's memories and guessed that he might have encountered a transmigration incident, he thought of this possibility. Transmigration was very common. Feng Chou's original body was less than 1.7 meters tall, and his body was skinny. But this body was obviously not like that. This body had a broad and strong chest, a firm and flat waist, and long and strong legs. This was undoubtedly a very fit and beautiful male body, although he could not see his own face. But when he thought about how the female drow stared at him when he first woke up, it was as if she could not wait to strip him naked with her eyes. He knew that his new body's appearance should be very good. After being ugly all his life, he had just changed into a decent body, but he would not live for long. This made Feng Chou feel that God was once again playing a joke on him. Just as Feng Chou was feeling sorry for himself, his attention was suddenly attracted by a birthmark on his chest. This birthmark looked like a pagoda. It grew on Feng Chou's chest since he was young. Feng Chou could not be more familiar with it. But the problem was, this body was not the original one. Feng Chou carefully observed his body again. Once again, he was sure that this was not his original body. But what was with this birthmark? Feng Chou was sure that this birthmark was exactly the same as the one that grew on his chest since he was young. Just as Feng Chou was in a desperate situation and was still confused about the birthmark on his chest, the old mage finally finished the experiment at hand and walked into the room. Feng Chou shifted his gaze from the birthmark on his chest to the old mage's face. The old mage was also a drow. His eyes were deep red and very deep. His face showed signs of aging. To a drow, this was a sign that they were very old. The old mage looked at Feng Chou's calm eyes and seemed to be interested. He squatted down and added some colorful gems to the magic circle. At the same time, he actually spoke to Feng Chou. Previously, the drow had been speaking a language that Leo did not understand. It should be the drow's own language this time. The old mage spoke in Avendelian. Avendelian was Leo's mother tongue. Since he inherited Leo's memories, Feng Chou naturally knew this language. In Leo's memories, Avendelian was a very great language. It was the official language of the fallen Arcane Empire. and it was also the official language of the powerful Alvendale Empire. The Arcane War destroyed the Arcane Empire, but not all the Arcanists. Some of the Arcanists who stood on the side of the gods, with the support of the Arcane God, established the current Avendalian Empire in the south of the northern continent. It still followed many traditions of the Arcane Empire, such as the Great Mage Council, and the official language of the Arcane Empire. As the old mage worked, he seemed to be curious and asked Feng Chou, "You don't seem to be afraid at all." Feng Chou looked at him and asked, "If I was afraid, would you let me go?" The old mage smiled and said, "At least I can lessen your pain if you beg for mercy." Feng Chou looked at him again and said with some disgust, "If I have to die, I don't care if it's more painful. Besides, I don't believe your words. I see malice in your eyes." As an ugly orphan, Feng Chou grew up being bullied and teased by others. He was very sensitive to other people's expressions and eyes. Since he was in the second grade of primary school, he could tell at a glance if other people looked at him with sympathy, disgust, contempt, or even malice. Feng Chou's personality was very straightforward, but it was not innate. It was cultivated by living in an environment full of malice for a long time. At that time, the young him could not prevent himself from being bullied. He could only make the people who bullied him unable to get more pleasure from him. The old mage smiled again and said, "You are an interesting person." Feng Chou turned his head and ignored him. However, the old mage did not intend to let Feng Chou go. As he worked, he said, "Do you know what I am going to do to you?" Feng Chou once again focused his gaze on the birthmark on his chest, as if a flower would grow out of it at any time. The old mage raised his head and looked at Feng Chou, a cold smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I am going to use a bloodline ceremony to inject the bloodline of these Taigermen into your body. Perhaps you don't understand the meaning of a bloodline ceremony. It is a kind of..." At this moment, Feng Chou raised his head and said impatiently, "Of course I know about the bloodline ceremony. My father is an arcane knight. How could I not know what a bloodline ceremony is?" The old mage did not seem to care about Feng Chou's bad temper. He smiled and said, "Yes, this is a little similar to the bloodline ceremony used to create arcane knights, but it is not exactly the same. The bloodline ceremony used to create arcane knights is actually just a combination of various spell structures and injecting the power of the ceremony into the knight's bloodline, forming innate spells similar to those of dragons or magical beasts. It does not involve the fusion or modification of the bloodline. Moreover, that kind of technology is already very mature, so there is no danger. However, the ceremony you will face is different. I will inject the bloodline of the Taigerman directly into your bloodline. According to my research and speculations, if this kind of technology is used, it is possible to avoid the erosion of intelligence caused by the bestiality. However, this kind of bloodline injection is very dangerous. It is very likely to cause your bloodline to completely collapse. Do you know what it means for your bloodline to completely collapse?" With that, the old mage reached out his hand and gently stroked Feng Chou's chest. "Your body will gradually melt. Yes, melt. Melt into a pile of minced meat. No, not minced meat. But, I can't describe it. Your body will completely disintegrate from its most basic structure. Even your bones will disintegrate into a pile of residue." Feng Chou's expression changed slightly as he muttered to himself in a dreamy tone. "And during that process, you will experience the greatest pain in the world. I guarantee that you will love that feeling." Feng Chou looked at the old mage and sneered, "Are you trying to scare me? It seems that my calmness has reduced some of your unusual happiness, isn't it?" The smile on the old mage's face gradually disappeared. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Feng Chou's neck, saying in a fierce voice, "Do you think I am trying to scare you?" Feng Chou looked at him with a cold smile. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 4. After glaring coldly at Feng Chou for a while, the old mage retracted his hand. He finally stopped nagging and concentrated on his work. But this time, Feng Chou would not let him go. Feng Chou deliberately used a frivolous tone and said, okay, I believe you. Okay? Look, don't be angry. Let's continue chatting. I'm very satisfied with the way you arranged for me to die. It's very cool, isn't it? Think about it. Melting like a candle. Dying in the most intense pain in the world. This is so different. It's much better than being killed by a knife, poison, or illness, isn't it? As Feng Chou spoke, he became excited. Even the old mage could not tell if his excitement was real or fake. When Feng Chou was in junior high school, he became the punching bag of the entire grade. Beating up the ugly boy from class 4 was a fixed entertainment for some people in the grade. At first, Feng Chou resisted with all his might, but the results were not very good, because the people who came to find trouble with him were all in groups. He could not resist at all with his thin and weak body. Later, Feng Chou learned the art of verbal attacks, which would often make those who bullied him explode in anger. Although this made him even more beaten up, he never tired of it, because they could not get too much pleasure from him. The number of people who bullied him decreased. Feng Chou continued to attack the old mage with words. Why did you spend so much effort to get me as an experiment? You know, a man as beautiful as me would definitely be very interested in those female drow. There are thousands of slaves in this city, and many of them are humans, right? Why did you snatch food from the tiger's mouth and get me from the hands of those female drow? Let me guess, it's my bloodline, isn't it? You came from one of the strongest bloodlines in the Arcane Empire, the bloodline of the Stewart family, isn't it? You must have failed many times with those civilian test subjects, right? At this point, Feng Chou stared into the old mage's eyes and laughed a little exaggeratedly. Aha, I can see from your eyes that I must have guessed correctly. After laughing for a while, Feng Chou stared at the old mage's movements as he placed the gemstones. He purposely put on a thoughtful expression, pausing for a moment before suddenly revealing a puzzled expression. Looks like you spent a lot of money on an experiment? With such a huge price, is it worth it even if you can successfully create a tigerman who won't turn into an idiot? Even though I'm only a mage apprentice, I know that the reason why the Arcanists made the bestiality contagious was so that they could create warriors cheaply and in large quantities. What's the point of using a higher price than converting arcane knights to create a half-baked powerhouse who only has the strength of a rank 8 warrior, but doesn't have the corresponding skills and willpower? Ha! Ahahaha, you old fool, what you're doing is completely meaningless. Ha ha ha. The old mage was finally completely enraged. He grabbed Feng Chou by the neck and said savagely, "What does an apprentice like you know? Difficult arcane problems need to be solved step by step in stages. When I create the first were creature whose intelligence won't be corroded, then I'll be able to obtain further data and theoretical support for further experiments. Do you understand? Moreover, creating a mage knight requires a warrior of the corresponding level. To become a level 5 mage knight, one must first be a level 5 warrior. Although a mage knight is stronger than a warrior, it's only 2 or 3 levels higher. However, if I can create a tigerman who won't turn into an idiot, then I can turn a civilian into a level 8 warrior out of thin air. Do you understand?" This old mage was quite strong. He grabbed Feng Chou by the neck and even caused his tongue to stick out. Although it was unbearable, Feng Chou tried his best to maintain a smile on his face, trying his best to fill his eyes with a mocking smile. The old mage, who felt like he was about to explode, suddenly tightened his grip on Feng Chou's neck, but quickly relaxed again. That short tightening of his grip made Feng Chou feel like his neck had almost been crushed. High-level mages are indeed not to be trifled with. This old thing looks like he's about to enter the ground, but he still has so much strength. For some reason, such a thought popped into Feng Chou's mind in this moment of life and death. The old mage took a deep breath and tried his best to calm himself down. He said coldly, "I'm warning you, if you dare to speak nonsense again, I don't mind cutting your tongue off." After saying that, the old mage loosened his grip on Lin Yun's neck. As soon as he loosened his grip, Feng Chou impatiently said, it's fine, you can cut it off as much as you want. It's going to turn into paste soon anyway. If you cut it off, I'll still have something left in this world, right? I won't shut up anyway. It's useless to threaten me, you old fool." Ahahaha. The old mage finally couldn't stand Feng Chou's clamor anymore. He waved his hand and cast a silent barrier. making his mouth completely lose its offensive power. Although he couldn't make a sound, Feng Chou still tried his best to use his body language and eyes to tease the old mage. After setting up the magic formation, the old mage immediately started his experiment. Under the old mage's control, the 4 black steel cages were moved above the magic formation. The 4 black steel cages stopped after entering the range of the magic formation. More than 10 sharp steel spears fiercely stabbed down from the top of the cages, piercing the bodies of the 4 tigermen. Amidst a series of screams, a large amount of blood flowed from the bottom of the cages and dripped onto the magic formation. The magic formation was carved into the ground using the technique of deep relief. Since it was a relief, it naturally had different heights. The blood of the tigermen slowly flowed along the grooves on the magic formation. When the 4 tigermen's blood had almost flowed dry, the blood had already flooded all the grooves on the magic formation. When the blood filled the entire magic formation, the old mage activated it. A layer of red light rose from the magic formation and enveloped Feng Chou. After being enveloped by the red light, Feng Chou didn't feel anything at first, but soon he felt his body start to heat up. As his body temperature rose, his whole body started to hurt. As time went by, the red light became thicker and thicker. Feng Chou's body temperature also became higher and higher, and the pain in his body also became more and more intense. Gradually, Feng Chou could no longer feel the heat. This was because his senses were completely taken over by the pain all over his body. This pain was neither fast nor slow, but it continued to increase in intensity, as if there was no end to it. Gradually, all of Feng Chou's willpower began to be used to resist the pain, and he couldn't think of anything else. The old mage looked at Feng Chou, who was enveloped by the red light, and his face gradually became a little surprised, because in the past, when the experiment reached this stage, the test subjects would have already started to let out the most miserable screams. Even the strong warrior Dro couldn't bear it until now, but Feng Chou didn't make a sound from the beginning until now. Feng Chou didn't let the people who bullied him gain pleasure from him. This was a belief that was deeply ingrained in his bones. So even if the pain made his consciousness blurry, he still clenched his teeth and didn't make a sound. The old mage's fingertips flashed with a faint blue light of magic, and the detection magic didn't stop to sense Feng Chou's body. His expression became more and more disappointed. The changes in the body of this human noble with a noble bloodline were no different from the previous failed test subjects. Suddenly, the old mage's face changed, and then he sighed slightly, flicked his finger, and the magic light on his fingertips extinguished, and turned away in disappointment. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 5. In the old mage's perception, although the human noble's body was still alive, his soul had already disappeared without a trace. The conflict and collapse of the bloodline was a long and painful process, sometimes lasting more than a day. However, very few experimental subjects could survive until their bloodline truly began to collapse. They would be killed prematurely by the terrible pain caused by the conflict of the bloodline. Even if the experimental subjects died, the collapse of their genes would not stop until their entire body melted into a pile of indistinguishable mucus. Although this damned human noble died exceptionally quickly, it wasn't unprecedented. In the old mage's opinion, a weak-willed human noble's soul quickly collapsed under the pain of the bloodline collapse. Although it was disappointing, it was not strange. However, what the old mage did not know was that at this moment, the noble before him, or more accurately, his soul, was experiencing something even more absurd and bizarre than transmigration. Just as Feng Chou felt that the incomparable pain was about to crush his will, he suddenly felt his entire body relax. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at a strange place, and the raging waves of pain disappeared without a trace in an instant. What appeared in front of Feng Chou was a place that was like a fairyland. Below his feet was a beautiful island, and he was on the mountainside of a beautiful mountain in the middle of the island. About 10 meters in front of him was a cliff that was dozens of meters high. Below the cliff was a coconut forest, a snow-white beach, and a dazzling blue shallow sea in the distance. Behind him was a large lawn, and a cobblestone path meandered through the lawn, leading to a building that was hidden in the tropical forest. The style of the building was strange, and it gave off a strange feeling of elegance mixed with a futuristic style. On the left side of the mountain, there was a building that extended beyond the mountain, hanging above the cliff. A small river meandered through the building complex, and finally rushed down the cliff to form a waterfall, and this waterfall became the perfect scenery outside the window of the building that extended beyond the cliff. Looking at the picturesque scenery in front of him, Feng Chou could not help but groan. He reached out to rub his face, and muttered, "Have I gone mad?" The transmigration from before was probably just a madman's hallucination, right? Just as Feng Chou was confused by the absurd scene before him, a voice suddenly rang in his ears. "No, of course you are not mad, my master. What you see before you is not a hallucination." The sudden appearance of the voice startled Feng Chou. He looked back and did not know when, but a burly man in black appeared beside him. This black-clothed man was tall and straight. He had thick black hair and a rough face. His facial features were so deep that they seemed to have been carved by a knife or an axe. His slightly triangular eyes revealed a deep and firm gaze. On his face, which was not handsome but full of charm, there was a deep scar that ran from the tip of his left eyebrow to the bottom of his right cheek. This scar destroyed the beauty of his face, but at the same time, it also added a bit of a valiant temperament to him. Looking at this strange man who suddenly appeared, Feng Chou could not help but raise his hand to his forehead and groan. "What the hell is this?" The man did not continue to explain. He reached out his hand, and a light screen appeared in front of Feng Chou. In the light screen, two grey dwarves were carrying a red naked corpse out of the mage tower. Feng Chou looked at the light screen that suddenly appeared, and was stunned for a moment before he realized that the red corpse was the new body he had just obtained. This could be confirmed from the pagoda birthmark on the red chest of the corpse. He looked down at his own body again, only to see an almost transparent figure. The man in black pointed at the corpse in the light screen and said, "In order to make the old mage think that you are dead, I had to transfer your soul into the universe of the pagoda." Feng Chou raised his hands again and looked at his translucent arms and palms. He felt a little numb, and asked, "What universe of the pagoda? Who are you?" The man in black said, "I am the pagoda on your chest." As for my origin, Feng Chou subconsciously lowered his head to look at his translucent chest. He was stunned for a moment, then looked at his body in the light screen and asked, "Pagoda? You mean that birthmark?" The man in black said, "Yes, that birthmark is my original body, the Qiankun Pagoda, and I am the spirit of the Qiankun Pagoda. You are now in the Qiankun Pagoda's small world, the universe of the pagoda." After hearing the man in black's words, Feng Chou was even more confused. He rubbed his cheeks hard and said, "I still don't understand what you are talking about." The man in black said, "It's a long story to explain everything in front of you." Feng Chou took a deep breath and said, "It's okay. Take your time." The man in black didn't take his time. He used concise words and quickly narrated. Next, Feng Chou heard a very classic story of a loser's counterattack. In the story, a rogue cultivator with poor aptitude spent a lot of effort and finally condensed his Jinden. However, he was misunderstood by a prince of an interstellar empire who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was tested to have a heaven-grade Tao soul at birth. As soon as he reached adulthood, he became a disciple of the most powerful sect in the Milky Way, the Imperial Star Sect. As soon as he stepped into the door of cultivation, he practiced the best cultivation methods. Without any explanation, he broke the Jinden with a sword and returned to his original state. Although the rich cultivator finally knew that he had misunderstood the rogue cultivator, he didn't take it seriously. He didn't expect that the rogue cultivator was so persistent. In the impossible situation, he created a set of unparalleled magic skills with an unyielding heart and extremely high comprehension. Not only did he recover his cultivation, which was impossible to recover, but he also practiced a set of magic skills. In the end, he appeared at the meeting where the rich cultivator took over the position of the head of the Imperial Star Sect, the most powerful sect in the Milky Way. He defeated the rich cultivator with a sword and broke the Imperial Star formation formed by the 9 masters of the combination stage of the Imperial Star Sect with only one sword. He killed tens of thousands of cultivators of the Imperial Star Sect and even threatened to remove the Imperial Star Sect from the Milky Way. In order not to implicate his sect and to take revenge one day, the rich cultivator had no choice but to refine a mysterious treasure of the Imperial Star Sect, the Reincarnation Mirror, into his natal magic weapon, the Qiankun Pagoda, and use the mysterious magic power of the Reincarnation Mirror to reincarnate. The rich second-generation sect leader had originally cultivated the top cultivation method in the immortal cultivation world. He knew that if he were to reincarnate and cultivate again, even if he were to cultivate again, he would still be no match for that rogue cultivator. In order to understand his opponent and to hone his own mind, the rich cultivator made a promise that he would use 100 reincarnations to experience all the sufferings in the world and hone his mind like a rock. He let his natal magic weapon, the Qiankun Pagoda, control the reincarnation mirror and let himself be reincarnated in the body of the most miserable person in the world every time. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 6. What Feng Chou heard was a hot-blooded story of a loser's counterattack. However, when he heard that the tragic villain in the story was actually himself, Feng Chou really felt a different feeling in his heart. After listening to the story, Feng Chou pondered for a moment, and decided to believe that everything in front of him was the truth. The reason why he thought so was because he felt that the things he had experienced before, including Leo's memories, were too rich and too real. He even mastered a new language because of it. He couldn't believe that these were all his illusions. While the man in black was telling the story, two grey dwarven slaves carried Feng Chou's body across the square and walked towards the dark stone wall behind the tower. About 300 meters behind the wizard tower was the stone wall at the edge of the underground city. There was a deep cave in the stone wall, where the old wizard threw away his failed experiment. The two grey dwarven slaves carried Feng Chou's body into the cave that was filled with a foul stench. After walking about 50 meters inside, the ground was already full of rotting corpses. The two grey dwarves casually threw Feng Chou's body on the ground and ran out of the cave while covering their noses. For most of the natives of the Underdark, there was almost no meat that they couldn't eat. But these two grey dwarves didn't even look at the half-dead Feng Chou. Countless painful lessons had taught these slaves that the meat that came out of the wizard tower was not to be eaten. Not only did the grey dwarves not eat it, but even the lowest creatures in the Underdark, the eyeless rats, didn't eat the corpses thrown out of the wizard tower. The two grey dwarves hurriedly left the stinking cave, and the cave was completely silent again. In the small world inside Qiankun Pagoda, the man in black, who was also Qiankun Pagoda, waited for the two grey dwarves to leave and immediately put Feng Chou's body into the Qiankun Pagoda. Feng Chou keenly noticed that in the light screen, the moment his body disappeared, an exquisite little pagoda that seemed to be carved out of white jade appeared where his body was. When the small pagoda first appeared, it was suspended in front of his chest. Then, it fell into a crack in the stone floor of the cave. After absorbing Feng Chou's body into Qiankun Pagoda, Qiankun Pagoda waved his hand and a golden light appeared out of thin air, enveloping Feng Chou's body. Because he had just obtained this body and was not familiar with it, Feng Chou did not feel anything special when he looked at his own body. Looking at his chest, he realized that the pagoda-shaped birthmark that had been with him for nearly 20 years had disappeared. This body was wrapped in the golden light, but it was still scarlet red. After waiting for a long time, there was still no change. Seeing that Qiankun Pagoda only released a golden light and did not take any further action, Feng Chou could not help but ask, "That's it?" Qiankun Pagoda said, "If it was in the past, I could indeed solve such a situation with a wave of my hand. But now," he paused and said, "now I can only use the stabilizing divine light to forcibly suppress your body and rely on brute force to prevent the collapse of the genes in this body." Hearing this, Feng Chou was puzzled and said, "Didn't you say that you are the top of the top 10 best spiritual treasures in the Milky Way? Even if you don't have a master, you can still save a mortal, right?" Qiankun Pagoda did not answer the question and said, "Master, don't you realize that we have now come to a strange world that is completely different from the world of Earth?" Feng Chou nodded and said, "Of course. If I am not crazy, I think we have transmigrated. Speaking of this, Feng Chou seemed to have thought of something and asked, by the way, speaking of transmigration, is this also your doing? Have I been reincarnated again? Qiankun Pagoda said, of course not. I am just like you, puzzled by this matter. Logically speaking, even if I am dormant, my intelligent brain system should have recorded your every move in detail. However, in the intelligent brain system's records, I can't see any clues. It seems that in the blink of an eye, we have come to a new world, and you have even changed your body. This change was so quiet that it did not even wake me up. It was only when you were attacked by the genes that the intelligent brain system detected that you were in danger that I woke up. Feng Chou did not find it strange that Qiankun Pagoda mentioned the intelligent brain system. When Qiankun Pagoda was telling the story just now, he heard from the background of the story that the cultivation world was completely different from what he knew before. For example, according to Qiankun Pagoda, humans on Earth were not the only intelligent life in the Milky Way. In fact, the central area of the Milky Way was very lively, and countless interstellar countries existed there. The periphery of the Milky Way was relatively desolate. Another example was that the cultivation world of the Milky Way was not as ancient as many people imagined. In fact, many of the interstellar empires in the center of the Milky Way were a civilization system that combined cultivation and technology. Qiankun Pagoda's pagoda spirit was the product of the advanced intelligent brain and Qiankun Pagoda's weapon spirit. It was very smart, and not only was it a combat assistant, but it was also Feng Chou's research assistant in his previous life. Qiankun Pagoda continued to explain, if we were on Earth, your current situation would not be a problem for me, but now, although I don't know what happened, I'm sure that the world we're in now is definitely not the same universe as Earth. This world looks very similar to Earth on the surface, but in reality, the laws of the two worlds are very different. This difference has caused me to lose most of my abilities. All of my supernatural powers can only be used in the Qiankun Pagoda. Once I leave this small world, my supernatural powers will collapse and dissipate due to the conflict with this world. Even my perception cannot leave the pagoda. Fortunately, you used a quark scanner as a reconnaissance device to install and sacrifice into my body. The technology of mortals is actually the mastery and application of the rules on the surface of the universe. This quark scanner is no exception. The rules on the surface of this world are very similar to Earth's, allowing this quark scanner to barely retain a small portion of its functions. Through this scanner, I can maintain my observation and partial analytical abilities. Otherwise, I would be blind now. If we were in the previous world, I would have many ways to solve your current situation. But in this world, the methods I know have lost the support of the rules. What makes me even more curious is that with such a big change in the rules, logically speaking, our souls, which were constructed by the rules of Earth's universe, should have long been broken down by the new rules of the universe in this world. But the reality is that your soul has adapted to the new world unscathed. Moreover, you have even taken over a body that has fused with spirit and flesh, as if you were born with a physical body. As for me, other than the loss of my magical powers, my body and the small world in the pagoda have adapted to the new world unscathed. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 7. Looking at the frowning pagoda spirit, Feng Chou shrugged. At present, he was not interested in the question of how he transmigrated, because this question was too profound, and it was not something an ordinary person like him could figure out. He was more interested in the other two things. First, whether or not his physical body could be preserved. If it couldn't be preserved, would the Qiankun Tower be able to help him find a new body? Second, how much ability did this magic treasure, which claimed to have lost most of its magical powers, have left? Thinking of this, Feng Chou asked. Qiankun Pagoda frowned and said, all of my magical powers can't be released outside the tower, and I can't even move my body, let alone take over your body. Unless someone happens to pick up my body, then I can take them in. If that's the case, I can try to forcibly take over your body, but if I just randomly find someone to take over, Their spirit and body will be difficult to accept. Not only will they be unable to cultivate, but their lifespan will also be extremely short. The reincarnation mirror is now like a dead object, and there's no movement. Probably like me, it has lost all its magical powers. Hearing this, Feng Chou could not help but worry. He looked at his new body wrapped in golden light, and was about to ask about the situation. Qiankun Pagoda suddenly made a soft A sound, and stared at his physical body carefully. After a while, he said with joy, "There seems to be a kind of, power in your physical body that is resisting the disintegration of the genes. This power seems to have a similar nature to the Tiger Man gene that invaded your body before. Although it's very weak, its essence is very strong." The situation seems to be getting better. Hearing that his physical body could be saved, Feng Chou suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. If one could live, no one would want to die. He thought about it, and felt that the power similar to the Tiger Man gene that the pagoda spirit mentioned might be the bloodline of the Stewart family that the original owner of this body had. The bloodline of the Stewart clan originated from a great arcanist of the Arcane Empire. It was said that this great arcanist had used cruel alchemy techniques to forcefully devour the bloodline of a golden dragon. According to Leo's memories, Feng Chou knew that the golden dragon was a giant dragon that possessed both the holy and fire attributes. It had two different types of breath, the holy and fire attributes. The bloodline of this creature contained dozens of innate spells. At the same time, it was also the strongest known dragon with the strongest melee ability. The Stewart family, which had inherited the bloodline of the Golden Dragon, was not only rich in dragon bloodline warlocks, they were also rich in powerful warriors. However, after thousands of years of inheritance, as a side branch of the family, Leo's Golden Dragon bloodline was probably very thin. This could be seen from Leo's mediocre talent. However, as the saying went, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. No matter how thin the Golden Dragon bloodline was, it was not something that the Tiger bloodline could compare to. Since his physical body could be saved, Feng Chou could not help but be concerned about another problem. That was, how much ability did this guy, who claimed to be one of the 10 great spiritual treasures of the cultivation world, have left? Under Feng Chou's questioning, Qiankun Pagoda seemed to be a little depressed. The original Qiankun Pagoda mainly had 3 kinds of magical powers. One was to absorb, one was to suppress and refine, and one was to protect. With a sweep of the Qiankun golden light, even a mountain range can be absorbed into the Qiankun Pagoda's pagoda universe as long as the Qiankun golden light absorbs you into the pagoda universe. Even if you are an all-powerful demon, you will be suppressed and refined into spiritual materials if you want to protect yourself. All you need to do is to raise the Qiankun Pagoda above your head. From the bottom of the pagoda, 10,000 rays of Qiankun golden light will descend, making it impenetrable. Now, of these 3 magical powers, the Qiankun golden light and Qiankun golden light cannot be released at all. Naturally, they are useless. The refining magical power is also useless due to the different laws of matter formation in this world. Only the suppressing magical power is left. However, without the Qiankun golden light to absorb all things, what can I suppress? The only function I can release now is the greatly reduced quark scanning function. Qiankun Pagoda has many internal functions left. For example, in order to cultivate again one day and recover your cultivation level quickly, you set up a spirit seizing array on the Qiankun Pagoda. You also made use of the characteristics of the pagoda universe to set up a time array in the pagoda universe, which can accelerate the flow of time in the pagoda universe. The fastest you can accelerate the time in the pagoda universe to the extent that one day in the outside world is 1 year in the pagoda. Originally, with these 2 arrangements, when you cultivate again, you only need to find an ordinary spiritual land and summon the Qiankun Pagoda. Then, you can plunder the spiritual energy in a radius of hundreds of kilometers and form a blessed land in the pagoda universe. Then, you can use the time acceleration in the pagoda universe to recover your cultivation level in a short period of time. However, this new world seems to have no spiritual energy. The spirit seizing array cannot be released and is useless. However, the time array in the pagoda universe can still operate as usual. However, upon hearing this, Feng Chou could not help but have a headache. However, to activate the time array, I need a huge amount of spiritual energy. Without the spirit-seizing array, I will have to consume the vital essence that I have accumulated. What's worse is that before you died and reincarnated, most of the vital essence that you injected into me seemed to have disappeared inexplicably during the previous transmigration. Now, there is less than 1% left. The remaining vital essence is only enough to activate the time array for a month. After a month, the vital essence will be exhausted. Not only will the time array be unable to be activated, but the quark scanner will also stop working. Even I will have to go into hibernation. After hearing this, Feng Chou could not help but be speechless. He said exasperatedly, after talking for so long, it turns out that other than the quark scanner function, it's not that you can't use those extravagant abilities that you bragged about. It's just that you don't dare to use them. Then, how can I replenish your vital essence? Qiankun Pagoda said, the worst thing is that in this new world, I don't know how to replenish it. Feng Chou said, in other words, you're still a one-off? Once the battery is used up, it's game over. Looking at the silent Qiankun Pagoda, Feng Chou was speechless for a long time. After half a day, Feng Chou finally recovered from the great ups and downs of his emotions. He asked somewhat dejectedly, if you don't activate the time array, how long can you maintain it? Qiankun Pagoda said, this depends on the frequency at which you activate the scanning function. If you activate the scanning function all the time, then I can only maintain it for half a year. If I activate it occasionally, then I can maintain it for more than 10 years. Feng Chou took a deep breath and asked again, how wide is the range of your quark scanner? Can you help me find a way back to the surface? Qiankun Pagoda said, originally, my quark scanner was the most advanced in the entire Milky Way. Within a radius of several thousand kilometers, not even an atom can escape my scanning. Upon hearing this, Feng Chou said in his heart, okay, sure enough. Qiankun Pagoda said, but now that the rules of the world have changed, although the scanner can still be used, even if it's turned on to the maximum power, the scanning range is now less than 30 meters. Moreover, the scanning and analysis ability has been greatly reduced. Feng Chou was completely disappointed. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 8. While the two were talking, Feng Chou's body that was wrapped in golden light gradually lost its high temperature, and the color of his body also gradually returned to normal. Qiankun Pagoda said, how lucky, your body is finally preserved. Feng Chou asked expectantly, has my body's original bloodline awakened? Qiankun Pagoda said, it seems to have only grown a little stronger. It's incredible. The essence of this bloodline is very strong. Although it has only grown a little stronger, your body has been strengthened by more than 3 times. According to Leo's memory, your current physical condition has even surpassed that of a human level 4 warrior, and is close to that of a level 5 warrior. Furthermore, you have awakened a special bloodline talent. This is your current physical data. As Qiankun Pagoda's voice fell, a translucent light screen suddenly appeared in Feng Chou's vision. On the left side of the light screen was a holographic image of his body that was constantly rotating, and on the left side of the light was a list of tables. The table's contents were as follows: Physique, 37 Strength, 38 Agility, 36 Perception, 14 Intelligence, 7.5 Spiritual Power, 18 Physical Assessment, Healthy Spiritual Assessment, Full Special Energy Reaction, None Bloodline Talent, Dark Vision. Looking at this light screen, Feng Chou asked, what do these numbers represent? Qiankun Pagoda explained, according to the practice of the cultivation world, we set 1/5 of an ordinary person's average ability as a standard unit. That is to say, in the Milky Way, an ordinary person's physical attributes should be around 5 standard units, according to Leo's memory, and the data obtained by the artificial intelligence system when it scanned the human slaves in the underground city. The humans in this world are also stronger than the humans in the Milky Way. Their spiritual power and perception are also stronger, and all their attributes are around 10 standard units. Only their intelligence is comparable to the humans in the Milky Way. According to Leo's memories, his physical condition is a level 2 warrior, as well as the data that the AI automatically scanned when he passed through the underground city. I can deduce that in this world, a level 1 warrior's strength and constitution should be around 15, and dexterity should be around 12.5. Every time a warrior levels up, strength and constitution should increase by 5 standard units, while the increase in dexterity is only half of that. Your body's current condition is close to that of a 5th-tier warrior in terms of strength and constitution, and your agility is much higher than that of a 5th-tier warrior. After hearing Qiankun Pagoda's words, Feng Chou couldn't help but think, if this kind of bloodline modification happens a few more times, wouldn't Leo's golden dragon bloodline be completely activated? In that case, of course, Feng Chou was only fantasizing about it. After all, where could he find an advanced wizard like Wizard Dro, who was willing to perform the bloodline fusion ceremony for free? In this world, those who could own a wizard tower were at least advanced wizards. Feng Chou smacked his lips as if he hadn't had enough. He stared at the attributes on the screen for a while, then pointed at the intelligence attribute and said, "This intelligence attribute looks awkward. It makes me feel like a retard with an IQ of 75. Adjust the basic unit of intelligence and unify it with the other attributes." "Yes sir." The screen flashed, and the intelligence attribute became 15. Feng Chou asked again, "What's with this dark vision?" Qiankun Pagoda explained, "The so-called dark vision is similar to the night vision of some nocturnal animals on Earth, such as cats and wolves. Creatures with this ability have eyes that are 10 times more sensitive to light than humans, and can maintain good vision in extremely weak light. Your body now also has this ability. As for why you have this ability, I don't understand." Feng Chou thought for a while. In Leo's memory, the Tigerman did have the dark vision talent, but whether the golden dragon had it, he didn't know. It should have. This was no doubt good news. In the underworld, this kind of night vision talent was still quite useful. At least the dim light in the underworld was no longer an obstacle to him. His body withstood the bloodline invasion, and it was a blessing in disguise. Not only did his physical fitness improve greatly, but he also obtained the dark vision talent that was currently very useful. This series of good news undoubtedly gave Feng Chou, who had suffered a series of blows, a shot of confidence. However, these changes couldn't change his current situation too much. According to Leo's not very rich memory of the underworld, Feng Chou knew that even a true level 4 warrior was still at the bottom of the food chain in the underworld, not to mention others. In the underworld of Dro, there were the bear goblin slave warriors that were the most numerous. The bear goblin was a humanoid creature that was born with better physical conditions than humans. Once they reached adulthood, they would have the strength and physique of a level 4 warrior. As long as they received some warrior training, they would be able to reach the standard of a level 4 warrior. However, a level 4 bear goblin warrior was only the lowest level of cannon fodder in the underworld of Dro. To Feng Chou, escaping back to the surface was still a wishful thinking that was impossible to achieve. Fortunately, to Feng Chou, disappointment was a normal thing in his short life, and he was already used to it. Feng Chou rubbed his chin and pondered for a while before asking, "Since my body is fine now, how can I return to my body?" Qiankun Pagoda didn't answer. He only reached out and pushed him lightly from behind, causing him to fall towards his body. Feng Chou's vision couldn't help but turn black. After a while, his body that was lying quietly on the ground suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. Standing up from the cold grass, Feng Chou lowered his head to look at his naked body and asked, "Do I have clothes?" Qiankun Pagoda replied, "Yes, but those clothes were brought from another universe. Once they leave the protection of the Tower Qiankun's laws, they will immediately be disintegrated by the laws of this world." Feng Chou was a little speechless as he sighed. "Then what do you suggest for my current situation?" Qiankun Pagoda replied, "According to my analysis, your best survival strategy now is to return to the underground city and mix in with the human slaves. According to the original memories of your body, with your and my current abilities, it's impossible to survive in the underground world." Feng Chou shrugged and said, That's what I thought. Well, it's better to live a bad life than to die a good death. Sigh. I've said this to myself countless times in the past. I didn't expect that after obtaining a new life, I still have to say this to myself. Qiankun Pagoda, who had always answered questions but never took the initiative to express his views, suddenly took the initiative to say, Master, do you need to recover the memories of your previous life now? If there are no accidents, I'm afraid that I won't be able to serve you for long. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 9. Feng Chou did not hesitate to interrupt Qiankun Pagoda's words and said, No, the memories of my past life are not only useless in this world, but they will also become an obstacle for me to understand and adapt to this new world. Although his words were pleasant to hear, Feng Chou was actually thinking like this in his heart. If I recover the memories of an old ghost who has lived for 2,000 to 3,000 years, then wouldn't my memories become a drop in the ocean? Would I still be me? I'm afraid that I will become another person, Qiankun Pagoda said. Although that is the case, my energy is about to run out. According to your orders, if a similar situation occurs, I must help you recover the memories of your past life. Feng Chou said, Isn't there still a few years left? Maybe things will take a turn for the better. Even if there isn't, you can wait until your energy is completely exhausted to help me recover my memories, right? Qiankun Pagoda was silent, looking at Qiankun Pagoda's face that was not handsome, but was filled with a strange charm. He asked curiously, Is your current appearance my appearance from my past life? The Heaven and Earth Pagoda spirit shook its head and said, No, you were so valiant in your previous life. How could you look like this? This is the image of Xiaozi Yang, the rogue cultivator who forced you to commit suicide. You wanted me to transform into his appearance so that you could constantly remind yourself to never forget your revenge. Feng Chou did not comment and curled his lips, saying, Send me out. Qiankun Pagoda did not say anything and waved his hand. Feng Chou only saw a blur in front of his eyes before he arrived at the dark cave. Feng Chou did not even have time to look at the cave in front of him before he subconsciously inhaled a foul stench in his mouth, causing him to cough. The more he coughed, the more he inhaled the foul stench. This incomparably strong stench caused him to cough and vomit at the same time. Feng Chou endured the discomfort and pushed aside a rock under his feet. The rock was 1 square foot in size and probably weighed close to 100 pounds, but it was thrown 5 to 6 meters away by him. Feng Chou did not care about the shocking changes in his body. He grabbed the white jade pagoda under the rock and turned around to rush towards the cave entrance. The air in this cave filled with corpses was too turbid and smelly. Feng Chou rushed to the cave entrance like the wind before he stopped and gasped for breath. Although there was a foul stench here, at least it was not suffocating. Feng Chou took a few deep breaths and looked at the white jade tower in his hand. When he looked down, he realized that the white jade tower had disappeared. He subconsciously looked at his chest and saw that the pagoda-shaped birthmark had appeared there again. Feng Chou could not help but reach out to touch the birthmark. It felt no different from the rest of his skin. No matter how he looked at it, it was just an ordinary birthmark. Looking at the birthmark and thinking for a moment, Feng Chou could not help but shake his head and laugh. Putting aside the doubts in his heart, he walked to the entrance of the cave with his back against the wall. He looked at the wizard tower in the distance and shrank back. Feng Chou looked down at his snow-white skin and could not help but feel a headache. He then looked back into the depths of the cave with a conflicted expression. After hesitating for a moment, Feng Chou took a deep breath and quickly returned to the depths of the cave while holding his breath. After a while, he ran out again and retched. Feng Chou had never been a fastidious person, but he really could not put on the clothes of the dead that had been soaked in the decaying liquid of the corpses. After a bout of retching, Feng Chou finally suppressed the churning in his stomach. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and thought for a moment. He squatted down and dug out some mud from the ground and began to smear it on his body. In this dusky city, his naked white skin was too conspicuous. The mud at the entrance of the cave was a little dry and did not stick to his body. He pressed on his stomach and felt the urge to pee. Feng Chou hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, and peed on the pile of mud that he had just collected. After a big puddle of urine, Feng Chou frowned and began to smear it on his body. He quickly covered his entire body with mud, and even his back was smeared with mud as he lay on the ground. After making sure that all of his skin was covered with urine, Feng Chou carefully slipped out of the cave. He stuck close to the stone wall and observed the wizard tower in the distance. He carefully crept along the stone wall in the opposite direction of the wizard tower. The wizard tower had powerful surveillance capabilities. As long as the master of the wizard tower was willing, even the lowest level wizard tower could monitor an area of tens of square kilometers without missing a single mouse. However, as a wizard apprentice, Feng Chou knew that this kind of meticulous monitoring would consume a lot of energy. Therefore, unless it was a state of war, the wizard tower would always only monitor a few key areas and the surroundings of important people. Feng Chou was worried that his current position was too close to the wizard tower. He was within the range of the wizard tower's surveillance. Feng Chou crept several hundred meters away, but the wizard tower still did not move. This made him let out a long sigh of relief. What Feng Chou did not know was that before he walked out of the cave, he had already been monitored by the wizard tower's tower spirit. It was just that the master of the wizard tower had set the tower spirit's preset warning condition for the tower spirit to detect the infiltration of professionals of level 5 and above. In the dangerous Underdark, only professionals of level 5 and above were considered a threat. Those below level 5 were just slaves and cannon fodder. After the previous torment, Feng Chou's physical fitness was just barely close to that of a level 5 warrior. However, the strength of a level 5 warrior was not just the strength on the surface of the body. They had already begun to develop the potential hidden deep within the human body. This inner potential was called Haiger's strength by the warriors. It was said that this power was discovered by the god of war of this world, Haiger, and taught people how to use it. Back to the main point. Whether a warrior could advance to level 5 or not was not the physical fitness on the surface, but whether or not he had activated Haiger's strength. Once Haiger's strength was activated, the warrior would be able to activate 150% of their strength in a short period of time, or even more. This would undoubtedly cause the warrior's combat strength to increase by leaps and bounds. Therefore, in the eyes of the wizard tower's tower spirit, Feng Chou was only a relatively strong level 4 warrior. A runaway slave was not worthy of its attention. Far away from the wizard tower, Feng Chou let out a long sigh of relief. He climbed along a crack in the wall to a high place, looking down and observing the underground city. In the center of the underground city was a magnificent octagonal building. At the top of the building was a huge spider statue. Even with Liu's poor knowledge of the Underdark, Feng Chou could easily determine that this magnificent building should be the temple of the Spider Queen. Surrounding the temple were 6 different-sized, exquisite and sturdy castles. This meant that there were 6 Drow families in this city. Surrounding these castles were some functional buildings, such as mills, defense towers, blacksmithing workshops, and so on. Outside the castle area, there was a wall that was not too high. Outside the wall, there was a wide open area. Outside the open area, there was a messy slave area. The buildings in the slave area did not have any pattern. There was not even a proper street. It was very messy. In fact, this slave area surrounding the city was also a defense of Drow City. Once the enemy entered the slave area, the Drow warriors, who were known for their ruthlessness and agility, would fight with the enemy in this chaotic slave area. Therefore, although the houses in the slave area looked messy and old, they were actually quite sturdy stone buildings. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 10 Drows. Bear Goblin slave soldiers lived in the innermost and outermost layers of the slave area. Bear Goblin had a strong body, great strength, and low intelligence. They were quite good cannon fodder and meat shields. Therefore, domesticating Bear Goblin slave soldiers had almost become a tradition in all Drow cities. Bear Goblin's position in Drow City was between their master, Drow, and the other slaves. They were the guards of the other slaves. Although Feng Chou was now on the outskirts of the city and it was easy to leave the city, he did not intend to do so. Liu's memory told Feng Chou that the Underdark was very dangerous and vast. He did not even know north, south, east, and west. Leaving Drow's city aimlessly was like a traveler walking into the desert with his bare hands. It was completely suicidal. He had to figure out where he was and find a route to the surface. Only then would he consider leaving the city. The only way to figure this out was to sneak into the inner part of the city. Through observation, Feng Chou found that it was not difficult to enter the slave area. The only danger was passing through the bear goblin's residential area at the outermost layer of the city. At the outermost layer of the city, Drow's patrols passed by from time to time. These patrols were usually composed of 2 drow warriors leading more than 10 bear goblin slave soldiers. The patrols passed by for a long time and seemed very loose. Whether it was the slaves in the city who wanted to escape or the people outside the city who wanted to sneak in, it was very easy. In fact, this kind of patrol was not to prevent slaves from escaping or outsiders from sneaking in, but to quickly deal with the underground monsters that broke into the city to look for food. For slaves, it was better to commit suicide than to escape. As for foreign infiltrators, it was meaningless for them to enter the slave district outside. What they needed to overcome was the heavily guarded inner city. Feng Chou repeatedly observed for a long time and felt that there was indeed no danger. He gritted his teeth and sneaked into the city while the patrols were passing by. He was already hungry. Feng Chou carefully stuck to the walls of the messy stone houses in the slave area, moving towards the depths of the slave area. The houses here were in a mess, and the ground was full of mud and puddles that reeked of feces. After entering this messy street, Feng Chou found that it was very difficult to identify the direction. He stuck close to the back wall of a stone house, moving cautiously as he observed the dead and tried to determine the direction. The back door of the stone house was tightly shut. Feng Chou did not dare to be careless. He tiptoed, bent his back, and walked past the door. The wooden door was suddenly pulled open, and a large hand reached out like lightning, grabbed his hair, and fiercely dragged him in. Feng Chou, who was grabbed by the hair and almost flew into the air, was hugged from behind before he landed on the ground. A coarse laugh came from behind him, and smelly hot air and saliva splashed onto the back of his head. Feng Chou only saw it at this time. An ugly bear goblin closed the wooden door, turned its head, and looked at him with a smile. Clear saliva continuously dripped from the corner of its mouth. Needless to say, the one hugging him from behind was definitely another bear goblin. In his panic, Feng Chou used all the strength in his body and used the back of his head to fiercely hit the back of his head. The back of his head fiercely hit something soft. After a painful roar, the arm that was hugging him loosened a lot. Feng Chou used the force of the bear goblin's head being hit behind him to raise his feet and kick the bear goblin's chest in front of him. His strength was as high as 6 to 7 times that of an ordinary person on Earth, allowing him to kick the 2-meter-tall monster in front of him, causing it to stagger backward. Behind the continuously retreating bear goblin, there was a wave of ripples, and an oval-shaped circle of light appeared on the bear goblin's path of retreat. Inside the circle of light was the scene of the heaven and earth pagoda that Feng Chou had seen before. The black-clothed, scar-faced man, Qiankun Pagoda, was standing not far away from the circle of light. The bear goblin staggered back into the circle of light. The circle of light quickly disappeared, and the bear goblin also disappeared without a trace. Knowing that it was Qiankun Pagoda's doing, Feng Chou's morale was greatly boosted. His feet landed on the ground, and his body sank down. Using his arms to support himself, he fiercely twisted his waist and leaned forward at the same time. He opened his right arm and swung it, breaking free from the bear goblin's bear hug. After shaking off the bear goblin, Feng Chou scurried to the side. When he turned back to look, he saw that the bear goblin's face was covered in blood. Its nose was collapsed, and its eyes were filled with tears. It was letting out low and painful cries. Feng Chou took advantage of the fact that the bear goblin was in so much pain that it couldn't even open its eyes to pounce on its back. After rushing to the bear goblin's back, Feng Chou turned around and stretched out his right arm to strangle the bear goblin's neck. His left hand clasped the back of the bear goblin's neck. At the same time, he exerted force with both hands and firmly locked the bear goblin's neck. If it were a normal person, even if they locked the neck of a bear goblin, it would be very difficult to kill such a strong creature that was born as a 4th-level creature. The huge difference in strength made it easy for the bear goblin to break free from a normal person's chokehold. However, Feng Chou was not a normal person. He had the strength of a 5th-level warrior. In other words, his strength was even greater than that of an adult bear goblin. The huge strength immediately cut off the bear goblin's breathing and blood supply to its brain. No matter how it struggled, Feng Chou just tightly locked its throat. Even if it fell to the ground and was pinned down by the bear goblin, he would not let go. After a while, the voice of Qiankun Pagoda came to Feng Chou's mind. Master, he is dead. Let go. Feng Chou's heart was relieved. He felt weak all over and collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. After lying on the ground and gasping for breath for a long time, Feng Chou stood up shakily from the ground. As soon as he stood firm, the voice of Qiankun Pagoda sounded in his mind again. Master, I have good news. I think you must be interested. Feng Chou stood for a moment and felt that he had recovered. While moving his numb and weak body, he said, Say it. Qiankun Pagoda said, Just when you killed the monster, the Reincarnation Mirror, which had been silent, suddenly started. I don't know how it did it. It absorbed energy from the monster and then transferred this energy to me. This energy is a bit like spiritual power, but much more advanced. I just tried to use this energy. Its quality is amazing. Ordinary spirit energy requires 300 standard units to accelerate the time in the universe of the pagoda to 365 times faster than the outside world and maintain the universe of the pagoda for 1 day. And this kind of energy only needs 10 standard units of energy. Feng Chou asked directly. I just killed the bear goblin. How many standard units of energy did you get? 3 standard units. Feng Chou was speechless. Killing a 4th-level bear goblin could get 3 standard units of energy. This was a 4th-level creature. On the surface, it was enough to be the captain of a baron's guard in the countryside. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation.